Everybody can hear me?
Yes,
Great.
Susan, do
So my name is Susan Clark, and I am the disbursement supervisor for supply chain management, and that includes our wire transfers. And we've been doing wire transfers in our department for many years. There's always questions surrounding wire transfers, so we thought it would be a good idea to have this forum, kind of go over how the wires work, and then take any questions that you guys may have. So I'm going to go through this slide, and I'm going to actually, we're going to be recording this today. And then I'm going to toss this over to Vartan to introduce himself. There we go. There we go.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. So glad for everyone who's able to join this call. For those who I haven't been able to meet formally, my name is Vartan Barkesian. The Director of Business and Financial Services at Supply Chain Management. So just a little background here. Part of what I oversee is our disbursements desk, which Susan Clark manages. And part of what we do in disbursements is wires. So we have a really good agenda here for everybody today. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat. We're going to have a good amount of time dedicated after the end of this semi-short presentation to do a Q&A. And from my experience, when we do these forums, the real crux of what we're able to get at is during the Q&A. So please feel free to either post your question on the chat, otherwise hold on to your questions, and we'll be happy to answer them all at the end of the slide, the PowerPoint presentation. So yeah, we'll jump right into it. Here's the agenda.
So this is the agenda that we have for you today. We're going to kind of go over what a wire is, how it works, how we process wires for our foreign suppliers, which are invoices, then how we process wires for travelers, which are slightly different from processing the supplier invoices. We have not been, we have had wire fraud recently that we want to kind of go over just to make everybody aware of things that could happen, and you know, making sure that we know who we're dealing with when we're handling wires. Then we'll go over some best practices, and we have a couple changes that we may be making to the wire program that we're going to go over, and then just a couple of definitions that might be helpful for everybody to know. And then we'll take your questions and try to answer everything for you. So the next slide, what I'd like to do is introduce you to our team. Kim Fine, raise your hand. There she is. Pao Zong, raise your hand. Michelle.
Hi.
There she is. And then myself, we make up the disbursements team. We handle all payments that are issued out of this Aggie Enterprise System, and that includes the wire transfers. So then we have Vartan, who just introduced himself, and then we have Carla Marcano, who's our invoicing supervisor. Carla, you're right there.
Hi.
We work hand in hand with her and her team to make sure the invoices get entered and the wires get sent and all that good stuff. And then we have Jim Hewlett, our communications analyst, and Crystal Ross O'Hara, who is our client relationships manager, who has been a very big help to us. Thank you, Crystal, so much for everything you've done for us today. So that makes up our team that we have here in supply chain management. And we'll get right into it. So this is our wire overview. What is a wire transfer? So a wire transfer is an electronic transfer of funds from UC Davis, our bank account, to another account, which is our supplier. The funds can be wired in US dollars or foreign currency to either a US bank or a foreign bank. The US bank wire transfers are very limited. We all know that. Wires are typically reserved for our foreign vendors. So why we have that is because our foreign vendors have a hard time cashing checks. not only that, but it also takes a long time for checks to be mailed out, to different countries. So often they'll go stale, and then we have to deal with them anyway at that point. So we have always wired funds for our foreign suppliers so that they can get paid as quickly as possible. That's our goal here in supply chain management. Foreign wires are initiated in one country. So for us, it's here in the US, and it's settled in another country. So that kind of goes into how long does it take for a wire transfer to get where it needs to go? I get this question actually quite a bit. And most often people think of wire transfers as being an immediate transfer of funds. But for foreign wires, it just takes a little bit longer because of the fact that it's going out of the country, and there are often times where it's going through other banks to get where it needs to go. So these wires can actually take up to 5 business days to be credited to our supplier's account. And of course, that could be longer just depending on how many correspondent banks are involved in that transaction. Wire transfers processed for foreign suppliers and for foreign travelers as an alternative payment method when they cannot accept a U.S. check. So basically, it's any traveler that's that lives outside of the country, outside of the U.S., and any supplier that resides outside of the U.S. as well.
And I just like to add, wire transfers are not an ideal form of payment for us. And I would think that's for most places. It's a necessity because
Yes.
we have foreign vendors, and that's the only way to accept payment. But if we are able to pay another way, a virtual payment or ACH, that is the preferred method, not a wire transfer. And we'll go into that a little bit more here shortly, the reasons why. But it's really, opens up to us up to potential fraud and other things. So, yeah.
One of the requirements for a wire is that the wire should be a minimum of $100. And the reason we have that in place is the amount of time that it takes to process a wire and the expense of processing a wire is just phenomenal. So for us to do a wire under $100 just doesn't make good business sense. So we like to maintain that $100 minimum. So keep that in mind when processing wires. And the invoicing team will kick back an invoice if it is under $100. So just keep that in mind when you're processing invoices or dealing with suppliers. Suppliers and travelers are responsible for providing the correct and accurate banking wire instructions. That information comes from them, and it has to be correct in order for the wire to get where it needs to be. Any missing information will, cause the wire to either not be able to be sent from the get-go, or it will be rejected by our bank. So it's really important that we get the correct banking information. There are times when we have wires, and this is probably mostly true for travelers, whereas we have to reach back out to the department to ask for additional information. Some countries require us to have a business purpose. Some countries require us to have contact information. Not all, but some. And so those are things that we may reach out to you to get. There's also other countries that have additional information that's needed, like Mexico, for example. They have a CLABE number that is required. So in addition to the account number, there's some additional required information that we need to get. Kim can probably speak to some of the other frequent countries that require this. I think Canada has a banking code, a 3-digit banking code that they also need. And we often actually have to reach out for that. And so that delays the wire from being sent because that's required information. So what I will do is I don't think in this slide I have a list of countries that do have additional requirements. So I will provide that to you guys because I think that's very important for everybody to know. There's probably about 5 or 6 countries that require additional information. So I'll be sure to provide that. Name, address, and Aggie Enterprise supplier. Our supplier records need to match to the invoice. So I always like to give this example when we have a difference in payee names, for example. If I were to actually issue a check based off our supplier record, it's going to go out with our supplier name as it is in our record. So the same goes for a wire. So if our supplier record does not match to the bank account name listed on the invoice, we have to stop our process and find out why that doesn't match. And oftentimes, it's a matter of having to update the supplier record. But I just want to make sure everybody's aware the name and address has to match how we wire the funds out. That's very, very important. So that could also be a reason why a wire gets hung up from being sent out, is when we have to reach out to get clarifying information about the name and the address.
Yeah, and we get a lot of this that we have to end up back on because the name doesn't exactly match.
It happens often.
It does.
Okay, so foreign supplier invoice submissions are automatically changed to be paid by wire transfer during the invoice entry process in Aggie Enterprise. So the invoicing team, when they're processing the invoices, if it is a foreign supplier, they will automatically make the change so that the payment is sent out by wire transfer. The invoices, once they are processed, they are routed to the department for approval. Then they're routed to our wire queue for processing by our disbursement team. We have to review each invoice to make sure we have all the necessary information. When we don't, we will reach out and ask for that information or clarify whatever, if we need to clarify something. Other routing that may be required that could delay the processing of a wire, it depends on the type of the payment. So if there's an invoice that is over $100,000, that has to route to our high value approval team for review. If it is an invoice that needs to be approved by the PI or the fiscal officer, it'll route to them as well. So these are things that could cause delays in the wire payment getting out.
We'll take a quick second here. There's some chat, Susan, that we could address quickly here. So from Lisa, can you explain the difference between wire and ACH? That's actually a really good question.
That is it.
You want to get that, Susan? Or
yeah, I could get that. So a wire transfer is a bank-to-bank transfer that is initiated by us. An ACH is it's a payment that is set up. So it's payment instructions that we set up in our system, or in our case, we use Paymode X to set that up on our behalf. So it's account information that's set up in the system. So anytime, and it's attached to the supplier record. So anytime a payment is made to the supplier, it will automatically look for ACH information, which is the bank routing and account number, and it will automatically go out by ACH. And ACH payments tend to get to the supplier within probably 2 to 3 business days.
yeah, faster.
It's fairly
In some cases, actually.
Yeah. One of the other things about an ACH is foreign suppliers are not eligible for ACH. ACH is it's mostly for U.S. bank accounts, bank-to-bank transfers. So that is a lot of the reason why we have to do wires for foreign vendors, because they do not have the ability to accept an ACH transaction.
So I think what you just said is that when you do a bank to bank, there's no direct electronic communication about the exact account to which that transfer should happen. You just tell the bank, hey, in other words, I'm not
Oh.
saying it any better, but I think you're saying there's extra steps and there's more opportunity for it to go the wrong direction when you're talking about a
Yeah, so
wire.
for a wire transfer, we're actually, we're inputting and providing that information when it's sent. For an ACH, that's already pretty,
Automatic and
it's
yeah.
kind of like more of a reoccurring, you know, that account information is tied to that supplier. And so it's more of a reoccurring transit. Yeah, so
Okay.
for a wire, we are taking the information from our supplier or from our traveler, and then we're entering this information into our system, and
Okay.
that's what goes out. So that's why it's important for it all to be very, correct information.
Right, right. So there are more manual steps each time, and that gives you an opportunity for tampering or for error. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
From Andina, does wire address need to match the bank address or the supplier address?
Say that again.
Does the wire address need to match the bank address or the supplier address?
The supplier address. So on our invoice, we have a supplier address, and it should be what it matched to what's on our supplier record. Does that answer your question, Andina?
Yeah, just lots of times on the invoice, it'll show the wire information, and then it'll show an address underneath it that is the bank's address, and we get requests to add that address
Yeah.
to the supplier record all the time.
Yeah, we
And
don't do that.
so I reject them a lot of the times, but it's on the invoice. So you're saying the address is on the invoice, but it's not their address, it's the bank's address. So I'm
Yeah,
just making
Yeah, we do
sure.
not want to add the bank's address to our supplier record. For sure.
Another one here from Aaron Boyd. And this is another good question. For the supplier's bank that take out a wire fee, are we able to add that fee on their invoice / travel reimbursement? Is that sufficient? And then the second part of that, do we need to provide more information in order to add additional reimbursement / funds to be sent?
Well, typically we do not pay for other banks' fees because if you think about it, like if I open an account with my bank, I'm provided by my bank terms and conditions and fees that they assess. So that's between the supplier and their bank. So typically we do not reimburse for those type of fees. We don't charge a fee on our end, but we can't control the fees that are charged on the other end. So I would have to say no to that. Vartan, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Right. Like an incoming wire fee is rare. Like it's the outgoing fee, and that's the fee that UC Davis pays basically when we execute a wire. But I don't really see, I haven't seen an if that's the question.
Banks may, the receiving bank, the bank that's getting the funds may have a fee for an incoming wire, but that's, again, that's not a fee that we typically will pay for.
Between the vendor and the bank.
Can I just, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Question for Erin, you're mentioning that your department's willing to cover the fees, but are these fees already included in the invoice? Or are we talking about after the fact that the invoice is paid?
They're not included in the invoice right now. And I just added like an explanation that we have these international consultants because we can't hire them through UC Path. So it's kind of complicated. But if we could, we would have them as UC Davis employees.
Oh yeah, that's definitely.
So like we want to cover that, even if it's a small amount, because we've been working with them for like a year or so. Like we just, yeah.
Okay. We could talk about that on the side. That's something we could figure out. Okay, so Aaron, I'll follow up with you on that. And then we have a question from Tim. Is a wire transfer process based on the payment terms on a purchase order, or is it processed and paid when it is received?
So it is processed and paid when it's received. So it is not, so the transfer is not based on the purchase order because, Carla, correct me if I'm wrong, you're getting the invoice and the change to wire transfer is based on if it's a foreign supplier. Is that correct?
The payment terms, when we know that it's wire, we change it to immediate for the time frame, but then it has to go through the approval channels before it actually shows up in wires for it to be processed. So we're usually changing wire payments from the payment terms stated on the PO to immediate. Did that answer it?
Yes, that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great questions, everybody. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, let us move forward to the next slide.
Okay, so the last slide was more for suppliers. So this slide, I wanted to separate suppliers and travelers because the process for us is slightly different. And I wanted to, kind of talk through how we handle the wire transfers for foreign travelers. So in order for a foreign traveler to be paid out by wire, we do require that it is selected on the header of the report in Aggie expense that you select bank transfer. If you do not select bank transfer, it will not get into our wire. It will not go into our wire queue. So before you start a travel report for a potential foreign traveler, I think it's important for everybody to know whether or not it needs to go by wire transfer. So that when you create the header of the report, you know right off the bat you have to change this. Oftentimes it happens where this is not selected. And so the default payment method for travel reports, if ACH is not set up in their profile, is to issue a paper check. So when a check is issued, lately we have been changing, we have been able to fix the process or the problem and get the payment out by wire transfer, but it's a very, very, very manual process for myself and my team. So I just wanted to really make sure that everybody understands what they need to do in expense to make sure that a payment goes out by wire transfer. This is very, very important. And then the second thing with a traveler is how to get the information to wire the funds to us, and that is by completing our travel wire transfer form. Again, often we have the transaction sitting in our queue, but we don't get the instructions. So we're having to reach out and ask for those instructions. And so it's both those things that need to be done in order for the payment to go out by wire transfers for our travelers. And then lastly, it is really up to the traveler to make sure that they provide us with the complete and accurate information again, so that the wire can be entered into our system and successfully be transmitted and received by their bank. Are there any questions on that, on travel? Of course, we'll do that in a few minutes. So we only have.
I just threw one in the chat. You're talking about when you're trying to reimburse someone, right? It doesn't apply to any other foreign travel situation. So I've got a traveler that traveled on behalf of our unit and they live in somewhere else and we're reimbursing them. Is that the situation where this would apply? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
then
there's a couple other questions in there, if you want to go ahead and look at those before we move forward.
yeah, we have another question from Ozzy. Is there a minimum for foreign wire transfers?
Yeah, I mean, our minimum is $100. That covers both suppliers and travelers. We have on occasion made exceptions. So if you have a situation where you have a transfer under $100, reach out to, you can either reach out to our AP help it'll get to me, or reach out to me directly for an exception approval. We'll take a look at it. We do, often make those exceptions, but I just like to make sure, I mean, there's nothing you can do if it's a traveler and their expenses are under 100. So typically we'll make that exception and send the wire out.
And then
Look,
here,
that-
it's to cash advances for faculty traveling abroad.
Yes. Now, I don't know the cash advance system within the travel Aggie expense. I don't know if Mary is on and she can speak to that a little bit more. But wire transfers are applicable. I'm just not quite sure where you have to. Mary, are you on? Maybe she's not on. I'm not sure exactly where in the cash advance you would select wire transfer, but I do know it is available. So we can look that up and get back to you on that. I'll see.
Yeah, I'll follow up with that.
Okay.
Then Kellyanne, is there ever a situation where a wire transfer would be used for a domestic vendor? Rare, and we really try to avoid that at all costs. But we do make exceptions based on the need and the reasoning behind it. We don't go advertising that.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes it's a sense of, we really do push back on it. Like Martin said, we do require justification for it because, we don't want to be sending U.S. wires out. They, most U.S. Suppliers can accept a check. If they elect not to, that's up to them. But, then we have other payment options they can enroll in and sign up for. But wire transfer is typically reserved for all foreign suppliers and travelers.
Okay, great. Okay. Examples of wire fraud.
So in the time that I've been with the university, which has been about 7 years, I have not seen where we have taken a loss, but recently we did. And the unfortunate thing is it was a little over $75,000. This involved an email that was sent to the department with an invoice. And then a second email was sent with an updated invoice stating that they have their bank account information had changed. They were pretty upfront with it, which was, seemed all fine and dandy to the department. But one of the issues with the email was that the email was hacked from the supplier and it came in with .com instead of .edu.
It was a university.
So, that was probably the biggest sign that there was a problem. And then if you did a comparison with the invoices, you can see the invoice was changed. It was altered in different areas. And then the confirmation of this updated information, there was no confirmation. Nobody reached out by phone or, by the original email to say, hey, are you guys, did you really update, is this updated information correct? So there were a couple different things that didn't happen that unfortunately allowed this transaction to be sent. And Martin, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, the fact of the matter is this was a very elaborate fraud attempt by the fraudsters. Things looked very legitimate. And if you just look at things on the face of it quickly, it would be hard to recognize the issues. So I want to say that. I also want to make sure that everybody understands this is why it's so important when sending the request or getting an email from somebody else stating that financial information's changed, or looking at the invoice, any of these different things, it is so important to look very carefully at every wire request that comes in. And just as importantly, when you're looking at that and verifying the information, you know, having a second set of eyes, verifying everything is on there correctly is of the utmost importance. When we execute a wire, when the funds go out, they're gone. There's very little to almost zero chance of us being able to recoup those funds. That's just the way it works in the world of wires. So, you know, we'll talk a little bit more towards the end of this presentation about, again, the benefits of ACH and some things that we're working on here. But in terms of wires, when the money is gone, it's gone. So try to have that in the back of your mind if you're submitting a request. Just to double check.
Yeah, because if you think about all that took, you know, the fraudsters had a bank account set up. They hacked one of our suppliers' system and emails. And so they went through a lot of work to do this. And then, you know, bold enough to email us and say, hey, our banking account. And so they're very bold and they're very, you know, they know what they're doing. And when VAR10 says the money's gone, it really is, because once the money hits that account, those fraudsters took that money right on out of that account so quick. And that's just, you know, that's the importance of, I think, like VAR10 said, we can't reiterate enough. It's very, very important that you know who you're doing business with, and that the information you're getting is from the, you know, the correct individuals.
But here's the good news. We have best practices to share with you.
So yeah, what you can do to help prevent wire transfer fraud is educate yourself. Be aware of the email scams that happen, and they happen every day. We all know about them. Make sure everyone involved in handling transactions knows what to do and what not to do. Of course, keep your devices secure. Ensure your computer, phone, mobile devices are secure, and you have good email password practices. And that's not just email, that goes for all systems, I think. In this day and age, we all have so many passwords, but email is very, very important. And then just be cautious of the unexpected requests, because most fraudsters, they're always in a hurry. Hey, I got this and I need it done now. I mean, that's a, you know, one of their MOs is like, and so we're always so service oriented. We want to help that supplier. And so here we go, jumping through all the hoops. So it's okay to take a step back. It's okay to take a breath. It's okay to look at things and maybe get a second set of eyes, like VAR10 said earlier, having a second person look at something. There's no harm in doing that, and it's just a good practice to get into. But yeah, those last minute changes are typically where they're trying to get you to jump through the hoops and get the funds wired out as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I'll share, you know, with the disbursements desk, whenever we get any communication saying this is urgent, this needs to be done now, everybody freaks out, right? Because it's like, whoa, what's happening? Yeah. Is this a lot? Because a lot of times, like Susan said, this is what the fraudsters do. So keep your eye out on that. Couple more best practices.
Yeah. So authenticate your transactions. This is going to be a big part that we're going to really want everybody to start doing a lot more of, making sure that you verbally confirm the transaction with a phone call. A lot of us have, you know, connections to our suppliers, and just picking up the phone is a really good practice, making sure you're getting the information from the right suppliers and individuals. Using getting your phone numbers from a prior correspondence or from our supplier records. is probably a good thing to do instead of using what's on the email. And just being aware of wiring instructions that have changes to them. That's really a key and a big red flag. Businesses rarely change their banking information. I'm not going to say they don't, but for the most part, they rarely do. So when we have this is where we really need to take the time to pick up the phone and verify this information directly with our supplier, with a trusted, source. This is probably the most important, and it may take a little time, but I just think that it's very important to do that, especially when we have changes to wire information. Know your vendor. If you're communicating by email, a lot of us do that. We are communicating by email every day. So it's very important to make sure we are, communicating with the right individuals, verifying any banking information changes, having a second set of person look at that. We recommend you use the contact number for existing suppliers from the supplier record. You can get that information by pulling them up in any enterprise. We may have a checklist that we will ask you to complete. If we feel there's a difference in information or something's not right on, because when my team looks at this information, we have access to historical data for wires that we've sent for suppliers. So if we come across something where there's a difference, we may send you a checklist and say, hey, I need you to do some additional steps to validate that this wire has come from the correct supplier, that it is, a legitimate invoice, and that the banking information is validated. We haven't got it completely in place. There's some additional work we need to do with this. I would expect that in the next several months, we'll have something more solid to report and train everybody on. I don't know, Vartan, if you want to jump in on that one a little bit. But we'll let you know once we get that going. And then for travel wires, just know before you create a report if the payment needs to be sent by wire, so that when you do process the report or create the report, you know that you need to change to that payment method on the header so that it gets into our queue, and then it will help us, and it will help get the payment out to the traveler quicker. So that's really an important step.
So I just want to elaborate a little bit here on this. So this is a new process that's going to be taking place because as a result, not just of the recent fraud that happened, but it forces us to evaluate our processes internally and how we could better avoid fraud. And so right now, in the interim, when there's any sort of changes that are made to the request, especially if it's financial information, the wire desk team, whether it's coming from Susan, from Pal, from Kim, from Michelle, they're going to send a form that we're going to require it to be filled out. And on that form, someone is verifying, most likely the fiscal officer, whoever's financially responsible for this, to verify that they, in fact, had correspondence with the vendor. They verified that this information is, in fact, legitimately changed, and they're going to sign that. And they're going to give it back to the supplier desk, and that's going to be attached to the request. Okay, that is in the interim. What we're working on is a more streamlined solution. So ideally, something that would be done through Aggie Enterprise, where someone's checking a box every time a wire is sent out saying they have verified that this information is accurate and correct. This is a new process that we're putting in place. So again, short term, in the interim, when we see something that looks like it needs to be changed, we will be, and it's going to slow down the process. We realize that. But this is sort of a necessity to ensure that everything is correct. So the wire desk will be sending out a checklist that needs to be completed, verified by the department. And then long-term vision, this will all be done through Aggie Enterprise.
And I think ultimately our goal is to partner with all of you to make sure that we are dealing with the right folks, that we are sending out the payment where it needs to go, and not fall into getting, fraudsters, getting, outdone by the fraudsters. So it's a partnership we want to have with you guys. Get into the habit of making sure you're dealing with the correct person. If you're not sure, pick up the phone. It just takes a second to pick up the phone and check in with your supplier, make sure that everything's okay. Yeah, so it's good for you guys, it's good for us, it's good for the university. We just all need to partner together to make sure we have the best practices in place so that we, do not get send out a fraudulent wire or take a loss. So very important.
That sort of leads us.
Oh, there's our introduction. Yeah, so basically, yeah, we just want to make sure there's the understanding that wires are high risk. Like Bartan said earlier, once a wire goes, it's gone. To get money back is just near impossible. We do try. We have things we can do, but these fraudsters, they know what they're doing, so that money is typically not there any longer. And so recovering from wire fraud, the percentages are extremely low. So just want to make sure everybody understands that high risk associated with these transactions. And then we have some definitions for everybody. These are a lot of different types of codes internationally used that I think would be helpful. I think we're going to provide this slide to everybody. So this is information that I think will be good to have and understand when you're dealing with a wire, what these different codes mean and why we need them. So, and how it helps us get the wire from our bank account to the receiver's bank account. Q&A.
Hey, here we go.
Here we go.
We are open for business here. It looks like we were a couple questions already in the chat from previous. So Lisa, again, who has the ability to change the banking information? Is it the central team only, or the departments processing invoices updating those details? So Lisa, who has the ability to change the banking info? Well, so let's talk this through. The vendor, if the vendor is requesting to change banking information, the department who is working with the vendor needs to validate that that is in fact true. So it's the department's responsibility to verify that the banking information has been changed. And again, this is us talking about picking up the phone, contacting somebody, making sure that you're comfortable, 100% comfortable that this change has been made. Does that answer your question, Lisa?
No, I want to know who exactly makes the change to the information in the system. Is it just your team with so the fiscal officer then says, yes, I've talked to the vendor, this is legit. Then do you make the change, or do they themselves make the change? I want to know how many people have the ability to make this change. And for everyone who doesn't know me, I'm Lisa Montesanto. I'm the controls lead within the campus finance team. And that's why I'm asking these kind of tough questions.
Hi, Lisa. So it is my team, the disbursements team, that makes that change right into our banking system. So that's CashPay.
Okay. You said CashPay?
CashPro, Bank of America, CashPro system.
Okay. And since I have the mic open, I'll just say, I just want to applaud you all for everything that you're doing behind the scenes and saying here. These are all the right things. And this is a tough challenge, as has already been stated. These guys are sophisticated, they're smart, they're relentless. The only thing I wanted to add that maybe you didn't mention, but I think Vartan knows about this. We've also seen scams where someone has hacked one of our leaders' emails. So you'll get an email from someone who you know is a high-level leader in UC Davis Health or UC Davis campus saying, "Oh, this is quick and you got to do it," and blah, blah, blah. And that can be hard to keep your cool.
Yeah.
But I know that the supply chain team here is here to help you if you're like, this is weird. Some rando from UC Davis Health leadership just emailed me and wants to change some vendor that seems unrelated. This doesn't, meh. If you need
Yeah,
to take that pause, take it. And this team, and even I am here in finance to help you just slow it down, because
And
as
that's
has
the
been
key,
said, you can't get it
Lisa.
back.
Yeah, that's the key. It's like anytime someone pushes or, something has a sense of urgency, it is so very important to not let that rattle you, to say, okay, I'm going to take it a little extra time to make sure things are, everything looks good and things are right. And it just helps you. It really does. And, I have 20 years experience in banking, and it's just always been embedded in me. It's like, anytime someone wants to push me to get something through, it doesn't work. It just doesn't. It actually has the opposite effect. I take it down a notch, and then we really take a thorough look at it and question things.
Yeah. Well, I need to be more like you. This was not a fraud situation and it was fine, but I got called out recently because as you articulated, we all want to help. We're all customer service, and someone was breathing down my neck and I skipped process. Me, I'm out of controls. But I love to help people. And as I said, there was no negative consequence, but a co-director on my team said, "Hey, we don't do stuff just by email. You got to follow the process, even for, so and so and so and so." And so I'm telling you that story just to say it is tough, and call on a member of this team or even me so you're not alone if you're feeling stressed by that pressure, because better safe than sorry. Yeah, that's our website, fraud prevention. Watch the 7-minute fraud prevention video. It's great. It was created before my time by our director, Courtney Finn, who is amazing, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, I've taken up enough time, but thank you for the response.
And Lisa, thank you. I really appreciate that feedback. I also want to just clarify. So we don't enter any financial banking information into Aggie Enterprise, into the system. Like the financial information we enter, it's per transaction into who we process our wires through. So just for clarification, we're not housing that banking information. Okay, next question. From Yulia, from ACH, is accurate to advise suppliers that they need to create an account with Paymode X, and then Davis can link to their account and send payment? Yulia, are you there?
Oh, there we go. I am. Hi. So we've recently received an invoice, and on the invoice, we had specific instructions that the vendor does not accept checks. I don't know the reasons for that. It's a US vendor, and they only want the payment to be sent either via wire or ACH. And we tried working with them. We sent them the link to Paymode X, and they still could not figure out how to do this. So I'm just trying to clarify the instructions. So is it accurate for me to say that here's the link to Paymode X, create an account, and then we will be able to link to their account, and only then we'll be able to send them payment?
So Paymode X, and for those of you who don't know on the call, so we work with Paymode X to onboard our ACH suppliers. Someone wants to get paid via ACH, it's done through Paymode X. The reason why is, again, we don't want to be in the business of housing banking information ourselves. Paymode X deals with that, and Paymode X is the one who will basically facilitate they'll house the banking information and facilitate the payment. So that's what Paymode X does. So when we have a supplier who's interested in ACH, yes, Yulia, what happens is they need to work directly with Paymode X, and then we update our system, not with banking information, but the way that the way the payment is supposed to be going out to the vendor, we update our process. And then eventually that gets set up and they get paid via ACH. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
But Yulia, thank you for mentioning that. So an update for everybody. Nothing has been officially announced yet. But I'm happy to say that we are working right now with a company called Payment Works. And we're hoping that this is going to be executed here in the next, I don't know, 6 to 8 months. But Payment Works is going to be doing something sort of similar in terms of what PayModeX does. They're going to be housing the banking information. Payment Works is a vendor onboarding tool where a vendor is going to need to log into their system. New vendors would log into the system. They would go ahead and submit the request. It gets reviewed by our team. But part of that, one big carrot here with dealing with Payment Works is not only are they housing the ACH financial information, but there's an identification process where it's insured. So if there's fraud that occurs via ACH, we have insurance with Payment Works to cover our end, right? So a lot more information to come about that. We are in the very beginning process of understanding exactly how this works. EC San Diego currently is using Payment Works. There's a lot of advantages to it. We're hoping it's going to streamline the vendor onboarding process. There's a lot more transparency on the vendor side where they are in the process of being onboarded through Payment Works. And again, that insurance there is really it's probably the biggest reason that we're going to be looking into this and hopefully being able to roll this out to campus here in the next 6 to 8 months. So sorry, not to get too sidetracked there, but thank you, Yulia, for that question. And
Thanks. I'm excited to learn about Payment Works.
yeah, we're excited too. Okay, well, these slides okay, sorry, Crystal, you're on that. I'm just trying to catch up through the chat here. Let's see. Okay, from Whitney. For wires that we are expecting to receive, okay, so wires that the department's accepting to receive, will you be updating this page to be able to enter the new Aggie Enterprise chart accounts? I've been putting the new accounts into the additional information instead. That's receivables. Right, Susan? So that's not really.
Is that more of an invoicing question?
Wires that we're expecting to receive. Let's see.
I think that's a cashier's question.
Yeah. Yeah. Winnie, are you there?
Yeah, that was my bad. Thanks though.
No, that's fine. Yeah. I would check with the cashier's office. Is that right, Kim?
Yes. Check with cashiers because they take care of all the incoming wires that people are paying the university for. We are only the outgoing wires for vendors and travelers.
Got it. Okay. Thanks.
Question from Gwen. Are we required to verify the wire transfer information when there has not been a change? Yeah, yes. 100% yes, because there needs to always be a verification when a wire transfer is being executed. Like everything needs to always be looked at. So even if they're not saying that there is not a change, we need to do the proper review when a wire is being requested at all times. So Gwen, I don't know if this is more of the question in regards to the checklist. So when we at the wire desk, we're not going to send out this checklist that we've referenced unless something has changed. But future state, when we are able to figure out a way to get this done through Aggie Enterprise, there's going to always be a certification for someone to say, we are validating that this in fact is accurate and true for the request. Just another check mark for us to make us feel comfortable that this is correct. Hopefully that answers that question. Okay. Sorry, guys. Okay, so from Mary, when we set up a vendor, they ask how they want to be paid. I don't recall an option for a wire. Does that affect how they are paid? Or if the wire info is on the invoice, they will get paid that way? And then Whitney, I second this question. Someone told me to choose individual paper check, even though there will be a receiving foreign wire. Okay. Carla, do you want to expand on that?
Yes, hi. So foreign wires, foreign vendors, we will pay them foreign. Those will be a wire. The domestic ones is where it gets a little touchy. There's plenty of things listed on an invoice that we're not complying to. At that point, we're going on how the vendor is set up in the vendor record. So if you have check, because you picked check and that was your option and the money's going to Australia, yes, we'll pay for that as a wire. Ideally, if the information is on the invoice, we won't have to reach out, it'll go through. If it is a domestic wire and we have Canada falling as far as like it can get a check and it can get a wire. We don't always go on what's based on the invoice unless it's Canadian, it's a Canadian vendor. Just because they put that they want it paid by wire does not mean that that's what we're going to do for a domestic wire. How did I lose you?
Oh, it wasn't you that lost me. I got lost before
Okay.
you started talking. Sorry, Carla. I got lost on some of the earlier stuff until we can come back to me.
Okay, so any questions about that for the invoicing and what's submitted and how we pay it? If it is a foreign vendor, we will pay it by wire. If the information is not there, we'll send it back to you to reach out to have that before we pass it on to payments. If it is a domestic wire, and again, we're keeping Canada in, that's our little, we'll look to see and clarify to make sure all the information is there to pay it by wire, just because some of the Canadian vendors do take a check. Some of them do want to have it by wire. But if it's just a domestic wire that it's going to New York, we're not going to pay it by wire. There would have to be a reason and the exception letter included with your submission that you got the approval for it to be paid as a wire and it's over $100.
And just so everybody knows, a domestic wire is considered a US wire. When we say domestic, it just means it's a US wire.
I'm sorry, US dollars. Yes. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Whitney, you had a question, a second question. And you said someone told me to choose individual paper check, even though this will be receiving a foreign wire. And in what context? Is this through travel or is this as?
This is as adding a new supplier in Aggie Enterprise, which I believe is what Mary was asking also. So I just meant like, I also have this question because I've been entering them and choosing individual paper check, but you guys just said that no matter what we choose, if they are a foreign supplier, you will be paying via
Yes.
wire, correct?
Yep, that's
okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Ozzy has had their hand up.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to quickly, I guess, ask my question verbally because I didn't know how to type this out. But I work with a couple of consultants that sometimes have travel expenses that are less than $5 because, so for example, our foreign consultants in India, the exchange rate is very generous and sometimes, their reimbursements are like less than $5. Because they're foreign, I want to, process, like their wire transfer the travel foreign wire transfer form. But once again, because it's under $5 and, right now we talked about how, ideally we would have a limit, I guess a minimum of $100. I wanted to ask, how do I go about asking for an exception or can we group them? Because sometimes they go on extended trips, but they have breaks in between. So I can't just do it under one reimbursement report. I have to make multiple. So right now I'm sitting with a couple of reimbursement reports that are $2, $3, $5, $7. And I mean, I would hate for the university to have to pay all those transfer fees.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's,
I don't know how to go around that. So I wanted to get your guys' input.
I mean, Do they have the ability to accept a check?
No. We've tried that before.
So yeah, honestly, it would be something where we would want to group them. I mean, I just can't. It's so inefficient and in the costs to execute a wire for less than $5. It's not conducive for the university. So again, we could talk about that more as a one-off. Feel free to reach out to me and Susan, and we could work on, offering other solutions.
Yeah,
But
maybe some way to, pay at a pot, yeah, there needs to be a different solution for those low dollar reimbursements.
Okay, yeah. I can definitely reach out to you guys. Yeah, because part of me goes like, I kind of want to group them together, but like the wire transfer form asks me for the report key. So I don't know if I can just add multiple report keys, or I wanted to come and ask about that.
absolutely, yeah, just shoot us an email and we'll figure out a workaround for you.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you guys.
Yeah, no problem. Let's see here. We pick up on the questions.
I had one in there. I was getting lost because you were saying that information on wire transfers isn't retained anywhere. But if I'm trying to make sure that my information is consistent with what we've done before, where would I see that? We must have it somewhere that payments went to so-and-so
So
and such a account. I don't know how you,
yeah,
we've got to have the record somewhere of where we're paying things, but so there's something that's not quite right about how I understood what Mike said.
So Lisa, we don't, the department shouldn't be checking financial information, right? Like, so Susan, if you want to speak to what we see in Cash Pro.
Yeah, so for us, we have the ability to look at historical, if we have it, historical data. And if there's a difference in what we've done prior for this supplier,
okay,
that's a hard stop for us, and then we reach out to the department. But for the department, I think what we're trying to get across is that even though it may be the same, they should just get into like the repetitive habit of making sure that the wire information provided or the invoice provided is from a legitimate source.
Okay.
Yeah, and Lisa, this sort of goes back to, oh, I received an email and they want to change banking information, right? So it's not that we're expecting the department to go back and look at historical invoices with all the banking information's on the invoice itself.
Yeah, okay.
If we've done business with them, we have the ability to see that.
Okay.
But and this sort of goes to the question that was asked earlier. Are we going to have to verify every wire? Yeah. I mean, you want to verify that this is in fact coming from the correct place and that, this is valid.
Right.
So
And if it looks unusual or looks not like what you're used to seeing, then that's when to take a pause and pick up the phone, either to the supply chain team or to the vendor, a person that you're used to dealing with.
And actually, I just want to chime in, Lisa. It needs to be every time, not when you, the department, think it looks unusual.
Okay, fair. I'll take it. Somebody be more.
Can I mention something?
Yes.
So, we have ways that we look at information every day. So when we go to do a wire, we go back into our banking system let's step back one. So we go into Aggie Enterprise. We look up that vendor number. At least this is how I do it. Maybe Pal does it a little bit different. But I go in, I pull up that vendor. I see if we have made any payments to these vendors on a daily basis when we go to do a wire. We double check, we check what the current invoice looks like, and we go back in to see what a previous invoice looks like, and to make sure that that stuff in the banking looks the same. And then if we can say 100% this is the same, then we process the wire. And if it's not, if something looks off, then we go to Susan and Vartan and say, hey, this looks off. What do you want us to do? Should we reach out to so-and-so? And then we start the ball rolling on getting the verification. Now, I know going forward, you guys are going to have to check that before it ever gets to us. But we're still going to have those checks in place
Yes.
to make sure that everybody is on the same page before we even issue the wire, so that we don't have the fraud going out. So that's kind of where we are with our process, and that's how I do it.
Yes.
So that we just make sure that it looks right, because we don't want to have anything come back to, quote unquote, bite us in the butt. So that's where we are going with all of this, so that we make sure that that doesn't happen.
Yeah, my team has done this for quite some time. So, we do a lot of due diligence on our side the best we can with the information we have. Kim is correct. We do take extra steps on our side to make sure we minimize the risks to the university. Thank you, Kim. That was great.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Well, hopefully this was informative for everybody. We appreciate everybody, doing their due diligence when submitting wire requests. Give us grace at the disbursements desk. Sometimes things are held up, but we're doing everything we can to verify and check, and there's just a lot of risk involved on the disbursement side with wires, with checks, so maybe it takes a little bit longer than you think it should, but it's because we're doing our best to verify and ensure that everything is accurate, and that we we're not in a position of fraud happening. So thank you.